Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Stories Are Medicine, Lockdown Live. In my case, it's Quarantine Live. I want to start out by telling you a little personal story before I get to the fables. A very good friend of mine, somebody whose opinion I totally respect, asked me a hard question today. His question was, do you feel like you're being socially irresponsible by doing these readings every night when you're sick? You got tested for COVID-19. Everybody knows you got tested for COVID-19. You don't have the results back yet, but you look good, you sound good. So do you think maybe you're being socially irresponsible by looking okay and sounding okay and doing that every night? And people are going to think that if you do have COVID-19, that it's no big deal. Like people like you and Chris Cuomo. And I thought, oh, well, okay, good with the Chris Cuomo part. If we're in the same boat together, it's a good boat. So I've been thinking about this all day. All right, hence, here you go. Full disclosure, in case it wasn't disclosed enough, no, it's whatever I have, I tested negative for the flu, so it is not. It's not allergies either, because the allergy medicine worked on that. And I was thinking about it, and I thought, if I did, right now this is being brought to you by a healthy dose of Theraflu, sometimes Chloraseptic, all the Ricolas, bunch of ibuprofen, because the other night the fever smacked me down in the middle of a reading. You saw me, I was schwitzing. It was bad. It was like terrible. It was like when Albert Brooks had that flop sweat in Defending Your Life. And I was like, that's not happening again. So, and like Zicam, because it's awesome, right? So all that aside. Oh yeah, this is all the makeup that I use except for lip gloss. But hey, I don't care whether you're sick or not. That's what people do. So here's my theory. If I came on here and didn't do any of that stuff and I coughed through the whole thing, that's not a very chill vibe to pervade to anybody. And also there's always going to be someone who's going to say, oh, you were coughing through the whole thing just because you want people to feel sorry for you. And then if I don't cough, then I guess we're going to invent this term tonight, then I'm COVID fishing, or, health fishing. If you feel like you've been COVID fished because I sound okay, from tonight on, that's on you, because I love you, everybody. But I'm going to do me, and I feel called to read these. So now we're done with that. So 2 stories from Tell Me a Story. Hey, Ellen. All right. The first one is a hard one. It's called Eagle's Flight to Heaven's Wall. I've been thinking a lot about couples who are in lockdown together. And in some of those cases, that's a bad, bad thing. And I think that a lot of women kind of tend to turn themselves inside out. And a lot of men do this too. You turn yourself inside out for your partner. And you do everything you can. And still not enough. But that's not about you. That's about the other person. So that's what this fable is about. And I wrote this, mind you, in 1999. So I didn't pay attention to my own writing for a good 20 some odd years. Here we go. In his nest, on the high ledge of the cliffs, sat the eagle. His sharp, clear eyes were locked on his objective. All his life, he'd known where he wanted to go and what he wanted to achieve. Top of the mountain, he said to his mate, I will crest heaven's wall. His mate wanted him to be happy, despite the fact that she loved their home in the cliffs, overlooking the valley and the river. She would go where he led. Every season they moved to a different nest, each one closer and closer to the mountain. Each time they moved, the air got thinner, and her mate was away more and more, making his practice flights. And she knew that he had to build his strength, his speed, and endurance for the steep flight to the top. In the mornings, just as the dawn broke, he would begin his hunt for the morning meal of fish from the river or small prey from the valley. Then he would leave her and begin his ascent up Heaven's Wall mountain. He was always so focused on his preparation and his goal that he seldom even remembered to give his mate a peck goodbye. When he returned to the nest, he would flop down and fall asleep. This season was the worst yet, since they were now within striking distance of the mountain, and he would soon make his big flight. "I can feel it," he said to his mate. "This is the day. The air currents are perfect, it's cool and mild, the skies are clear. I'll make my flight today." He added, "I will beat the mountain today, and everyone will know I'm great." Since she never dared to ask what would happen once the flight had actually been made, his mate was not sure of how she felt about this. But she worked up her courage and she asked, "Once you reach the top, what will happen then?" He was stunned. How could she ask such a foolish thing? Once he'd made the flight to the top, their lives would be perfect. He'd be revered among all creatures for his prowess. With a tinge of annoyance, he said to her, "We shall be blissfully happy then. You will have everything you've ever dreamed of, I promise you that." His mate had never had big dreams. She'd wanted love and security and a mate with whom to share the great joys of life. She was sure she had all those things now, but her mate said it, so it must be true, and her trust in him was as boundless as her love. Then a thought nagged at her. If it's taken you all your life to become strong enough to fly to the top of the mountain, then how am I going to fly up to join you? "Don't be ridiculous," he said. "It is so like you to just ruin my moment of triumph by worrying about yourself. Look, all will be well once I've reached the summit," he said. "If you're so worried about it, then perhaps you should just fly halfway up and then walk the rest of the way to meet me." This seemed like a very difficult task to his mate, but she really didn't want to disappoint him. "All right," she said, "I'll do as you suggest, and I guess I'll just see you at the top." And so it was that Eagle set out on his flight with all of his neighbors cheering his departure. Meanwhile, his mate began her flight along a separate face of the mountain. She chose a different path at his encouragement. She thought that he was being kind, showing her a safer route, but in truth, he didn't want her to steal his thunder. When he rose, he wanted all eyes to be on him. Eagle knew every span of sky. He started out slowly, then he gained speed as he used the wind to glide and soar up to the summit. He felt glorious. He was the all-powerful bird of the skies, and none could match him. The higher he got, the more his lungs burned from the lack of oxygen. But he had trained for this. He was able to take shallow breaths and rise in wheeling circles on the updrafts. Unfortunately, his mate didn't have the benefit of that kind of training or advice, and so she just barely made the midpoint without plummeting from the sky. Faint with exertion and the thin air, she rested on a ledge. She could just make out the shape of her mate as he rose high and higher in the sky. She was so proud of him. "I must not disappoint him," she said to herself, taking a ragged breath. She began to work her way up the sheer face of the mountain. She would work inch by inch along a tilted ledge and then fly up a little to the next level. And occasionally she could make longer flights and save her chipping talons from the harsh work of climbing. But as time wore on, her strength began to flag. The sun shone brilliantly above the mountain, and looking up was difficult. She closed her eyes and asked the mountain for help. "Please, please," she said humbly. I'm not trying to climb you for myself. I don't want anything from you but to survive and live happily with my mate. I am not here to conquer you. I know that you're greater than I. Only please, Great One, just allow me to rise, and I will tell everyone I meet how you gave me your strength and helped me on my way." the mountain rumbled. And then a deep voice that seemed to come from all around spoke. I don't make deals, little one, it said. If I help you to the top, it's for my own reasons. They may not be reasons that you can appreciate or accept. The Lady Eagle knew that the mountain had all of the power. It had but to shrug its massive shoulders to send her plummeting or to bury her in rock. What is it then that I should do? She asked him. Am I to die here alone? The rock beneath her warmed, and a ledge expanded out that allowed her to lie down and rest. Do you feel alone? The mountain asked. No. Actually, I feel fine now. All right. I will help you to the summit, the mountain said. But once you are there, you must do exactly as I wish. You must not claim credit for yourself. Trust that I will save you. Can you do these things? She was really not sure that she could. And so, being a very truthful bird, she said, I don't know if I'm that strong, but I'm going to do my best. And so it was that the mountain shifted and made a moving stair of rock that she rode to the top, arriving just in time to see her mate approach. Half dead with exhaustion, he landed with a thud at her feet, and she covered him with her wing, and she rocked him. It was such a relief to see him safe and whole. It took several minutes before he recovered himself and realized at whom he was looking. You! He screeched. How's it possible? How could you? Flustered by this hostile greeting, she offered him water. He dashed away in his attack. No, she cried. I tried to go up the mountain just as you said, but it was just too difficult. It was the mountain itself that helped me to make it here before you. I only conceded that it was more powerful than I am, and it brought me to the top. He was blind with rage and humiliation. Such talk! Did she actually think that he would believe her story about the mountain coming to life? She must have been training in secret. She planned to steal his glory all along. Eagle's rage knew no boundaries. He pecked at her eyes, beat at her with his massive wings, and his talons tore at her heart. Finally, as she lay at the ledge of the abyss, the mountain shook. A wall of rock rose between the two birds, and the male eagle fell back in terror. He realized that his mate had told the truth. What have I done? He cried. I'm sorry. Look, please just let me go to her. The voice of the mountain was solemn and hard as granite. You have placed yourself and your ego above all else in life, Eagle. It said, today you have sacrificed your love for your own betterment. What you are feeling now is fear, not regret. It was true, but Eagle was not about to admit that out loud. You are a hard one to teach, Eagle, the mountain said. I will keep your wife with me until you can find your way. You've damaged your wings in your attack, and they are not going to mend sufficiently for you to make this flight again. If you want to return to this place, you're going to have to humble yourself before me. Eagle panicked. He decided to lie to the mountain. He would say what it wanted to hear in order to get what he wanted. Anything you say, he shouted. You are all powerful. Yep, I am nothing. I have learned my lesson. I really have. The wall between the two birds lowered. He saw his mate bloodied and unmoving on the ledge where the mountain met the sky. She was nodding her head as if she was agreeing to some instruction she was receiving, but he couldn't hear anything. But she heard the voice of the rock beneath her say, You've done well, my child. Now roll off the edge, and I will save you. Her mind was hazy with pain, but she remembered her promise. With the last of her power, she rolled off the edge and fell cartwheeling through the sky. "No!" cried her mate, but he was too late. Rushing to the edge, he saw her falling. Then the rock of the mountain reached out, enveloped her in midair, and the rock retracted back into the body of the mountain, and she vanished. The mountain continued to shudder, and Eagle looked down to see its face shifting and changing. The side of the mountain became smooth and polished as glass, and etched on the face of the polished rock was an image of his love in flight. It stretched for miles. You could see it from all the way down in the valley. "No, don't take her, please," he wept and begged. "You've given her to me," the mountain replied. "Now, go back to the base. Start over again, and the day that you are strong enough to ask me to help you rise to the summit, I'll reunite you with your mate." In the blink of an eye, Eagle found himself standing in his empty nest and gazing up at the mountain. He looked up at the image emblazoned across its face and wept. He cried for his mate, but more for himself. For now he knew that he was not all-powerful. Unfortunately, it would be many years and many tears before his image would join that of his mate on the sheer face of heaven's wall. To cheer up a little bit after that one, huh? All right, this one's the crab. See, isn't he lovely? In the shallows, by a jetty of large gray rocks, lived a fiddler crab named Clack. He was so named for the sound that his pincers made every time someone passed by him. While the other fiddler crabs spent their time skittering hither and yon and playing their tunes, Clack remained silent. His music was disharmony, and the pleas of the other crabs for him to change his tune fell upon deaf ears. Back into his hole, Clack crept and kept a constant vigil. When anyone passed by too close to his front door, they would be lucky to just escape with one good scare, as his large claw would dart out and clack at them. It didn't matter if it was friend or foe. Clack gave the same greeting to all who passed. He simply snapped at them. Odd thing was that deep down, Clack was a very tender sort of fellow who wanted nothing more than to have friends and loved ones about him. He really longed to show off his collection of flotsam and exchange the latest news as others did. Unfortunately, it was just his nature to snap and pinch. If there was music in his heart, he certainly didn't hear it over all of the harsh words that he kept drumming up. Whenever his old friend Pufferfish swam by to say hello, Clack would say the worst, most surly things that he could come up with. "Looking portly today, aren't we, Puffy? Looking fit to be caught at any moment." Although Puffer knew his friend never meant what he said, he still felt a little prickle under his scales. He wondered how anyone could be happy making others feel so much discomfort. Clack knew how to be nice. He had seen it done often enough, but somehow he just couldn't bring himself to say the sweet thing when the sour caused so much of a pleasant stir. "Besides," he said to himself, "they all know that I'm only joking. Just trying to liven things up a little bit. They can't take a joke. They deserve to feel a little pinch." Well, time passed, and after a few years of what Clack considered to be his witty remarks, he was surprised to find that he was so lonely. "Why?" he asked himself. It just doesn't add up. I mean, I'm the life of the party, yet here I am every Saturday night without a place to go. I haven't even been to a party in ages. So Clack decided it must be the neighborhood. That was it. Of course, he'd just pick himself up, scuttle off to someplace, and find someplace he was appreciated. Clack moved. He settled. He clacked and he wisecracked. He told the local starfish that they were too pointy-headed to have any sense. He clipped the fin of a prominent cod, and he scraped the coral whenever he had the chance. Clack moved again. He settled again, and again, and again. The world is just such a terrible place, he complained to all who would listen. Creatures have no sense of humor. Their values are all wrong. You know, if everybody was just as easygoing as I am, things would be great. More often than not, he found himself telling those things to himself because he was all alone in his hole. Then one day he met a young crab that was playing among the anemone. The young crab looked up to Clack and admired his fast talking to everyone. The little fellow thought to himself, someday I will run everybody around with an iron claw just like Clack. And so it came to pass that the happy young crab stopped playing happily with the clownfish. His games of hide and seek among the anemone ended as well, and Clack watched in dismay as the young crab became an outcast among his peers. The little crab dug his hole just like Clack's, and he scuttled himself away. Well, this had to stop, Clack thought, and he scuttled over to the other hole. Hey, boy, you. Get your crabby self out of here. Huh? Come here. Yeah, you, come here. Hearing his hero's voice, the young crab rushed out. What in the ocean and the tide pool's gotten into you? Crab demanded. You used to be a happy young fella, and now every time I look over here, you're harassing some poor citizen, poking at folks, and being generally surly. Stunned, the young crab replied, but I only wanted to be like you. You know, tough. Tough? I'm not tough. I'm a funny guy. I make people laugh. Everybody loves me, he said. But he had this little tickling sensation at the back of his shell that he always got when something really bad was about to happen. And the young crab couldn't have been more hurt or disillusioned. I mean, here was his hero, the crab of steel, acting like a simpering old fool. He was so angry that he lashed out at Clack. And too soon they were kicking up the dust and locked in mortal combat. When the sand settled, the young crab had won the battle and scuttled back to his hole, and Clack had lost his right claw, but was able to make it back to his hole. Once again, he began to seriously ponder his life. As painful as it was to admit, he had been wrong. His scathing sense of humor, his snappish ways, his unyielding sense of what was right and what was wrong, it had made him an outcast. Worse, he'd unwittingly lured this young crab away from the right path. He knew what he had to do now. He had led by poor example before, and now he was going to have to lead by a better one. He'd have to come out of his hole and greet creatures with a smile, not a scowl. And it dawned on him that what he really needed to make things right was his big claw back so that he could play a tune and draw the other crab out. Then Clack did something that he'd never done before. He scuttled to shore and he looked up at the stars and he said, all right, please. It was a word he was very unfamiliar with. Please, could you maybe let my claw grow back so that I could put things to rights? I promise I'm never going to use it to snap at anybody again, okay? Is it a deal? There was no answer. Clack scuttled back into his hole and he went to sleep. But when he awoke, he found that his claw had grown back good as new. He rushed out of the hole. Hey, thank you! Thank you! I know what I have to do now! And he went to the mouth of the young crab's hole for the first time in his life, and he made music. It was so strong and beautiful that creatures gathered around him to listen. The tune ran a long course, starting out rough and clipped, just as he'd once been. And then it became lonely and sad. Finally, the music soared like the gulls above the surface. When he finished, all was quiet, and the young crab moved over slowly out of his hole. Wow, I want to make music like that, he sighed, forgetting to be tough. Can you teach me how to do that? Clack scuttled over and he rested his claw on the young crab's back. There's some songs, young fella, that you cannot be taught. They have to be earned. Get out of that hole. Go out into the world, boy. Listen more than you talk, okay? Smile more than you frown. Hold yourself back and don't snap, Clack added. Then maybe your song can begin the way that mine ended. And if it does, buddy, then the world's going to be your oyster. Thank you for joining me tonight. For anyone who missed the beginning, I didn't cough through this session because I am on a mountain load of everything from cough drops to ibuprofen. There are no test results back yet on COVID-19. I'm hoping this is just some nasty bug. But until then, I love y'all. Signing off from quarantine. Hope your day's good and you don't meet anybody who's crabby.